I discovered lucid dreaming's ultimate illusion. It's a truth that most people don't want to hear, but those who accept it will genuinely master lucid dreaming. So today's video is all about truth, deception, and illusions, because lucid dreaming, at its heart, is a journey into honesty, a journey into brutal truths about reality. If you want to be a lucid dreamer, you need to learn to see through illusion, to cut down dishonesty, and see life for what it truly is. So we'll be exploring how society, and even your own mind, lie to you, and how you can break through those lies and become a true lucid dreamer. And to be frank, many of the topics in today's video might be a little bit uncomfortable. We accept many illusions into our life because they make us feel better. So if you're not ready to dive into the true nature of self-deception and how breaking through that leads to lucid dreams, then you might want to skip this video. But if you're ready to adventure into the mind, keep watching. Lucid dreaming, knowing that you're dreaming whilst you're dreaming, could also be called honest dreams or true dreams, because in those dreams you realize the true nature of your situation, you see through the illusion, and as you'll learn, honesty is a key to unlock the world of lucid dreams. But just like some cosmic onion, there are layers of illusion, layers of self-deception that we're all trapped within. So let's unlock the first layer of illusion. Layer 1. Cognitive biases and self-deception. Believe it or not, you've never seen reality, at least not directly. What your mind does is it creates a model of reality based on the input from your senses. So right now, the world you're experiencing isn't seen with your eyes, it's seen with your mind. Or in other words, everything you've ever experienced, everything you've ever known, is an interpretation of reality, not reality itself. And as we all know, interpretations or models are prone to imperfections, to distortions. The human brain wasn't designed to experience reality exactly. It was designed to survive in a complex universe, and this is where something called a cognitive bias rears its head. A cognitive bias is where the brain takes a shortcut, it simplifies reality, and these shortcuts are vital for our survival in this universe, but they can distort reality, leading us to believe things that just aren't true. And frankly, brains do this on a multitude of levels. Virtually everything you think you believe or know about reality is a simplification. Brains are incredibly susceptible to something called confirmation bias. That simply means when you already believe something, you are more likely to seek out information which confirms what you believe. And then there's selective attention, where we focus our attention on that which interests us and filter out anything that doesn't fit our narrative. And then you can add memory bias to this cake of self-deception. Our memories are not exact replicas of the past. They are influenced by our emotions, events that happen afterwards, and in fact, every time you recall a memory, you edit it. So I want you to think back to the last argument you had. Arguments are a great example of confirmation bias. Virtually every time we find ourselves in a heated debate, we will cherry-pick information that confirms our beliefs. Arguments are rarely objective, they're just a subjective battle of confirmation bias. And I'm sure you've had this experience. Let's say you've been on a family holiday a couple of years back, and everyone starts talking about it, but everyone's recollection of events are slightly different. Why would that be the case if our memories were an exact replica of the past? And these are just really simple examples of just some of the ways that the brain performs self-deception. But this occurs on multiple levels. The brain isn't a reality perception machine, it is a reality deception machine designed for survival. As a lucid dreamer, one of the first steps you need to take when it comes to questioning the nature of reality is understanding that your beliefs about reality, the way you think about reality, are not predicated on the truth. One of the reasons for non-lucid dreams is because we trust ourselves too much. We have too high of an opinion of our opinions, and we need to be humble about those. So, as a lucid dreamer, start to become distrustful of your own thinking. And that takes us neatly on to layer 2, societal deceptions. So here's the thing, whilst our mind is busy creating an imperfect map of reality, society is doing its own job distorting and amplifying these deceptions. So here's a question for you, and I want you to answer as honestly as possible. How many of your beliefs about the world, be it politics, be it something else, are actually your own beliefs that you came to without any outside input? For most of us, if we're thinking deeply and thinking clearly, the answer is very few indeed, because most of what we know comes from the society we live in. Even if you stumble across something of your own free will, your own volition, you will research it based on societal norms, societal expectations. Take, for example, society's concept of success. Now, you've probably internalized what it means to be successful. Was that a choice you made, or was it something you were told? Think about the kinds of things you want in your life. What kind of house you'd like to live in, what kind of clothes you'd like to wear, what kind of partner you'd like to date, what you consider to be attractive, what you consider to be unattractive, what kind of foods you enjoy, what kind of lifestyle you want to experience. How many of these things come from you, and how many of them come from societal pressures and influence? Even lucid dreaming itself. Why do you want to be a lucid dreamer? Was this a self-generated independent thought, or was it an influence from outside? But also, we live in the world of algorithms. Right now, you're watching this video probably on YouTube, and YouTube is paying close attention to your interests, and it's going to feed back to you exactly the kinds of things it thinks you want to watch, which amplifies your confirmation bias. Practically, when you find yourself in a lucid dream, walking the landscape of your mind, you are in a world that has been seeded by all of these things: societal influences, your expectations and beliefs about reality. This is why the dreams unfold the way they do. And if you want to control your dreams, you first need to understand why you think the way you think. And of course, I'm not asking you to avoid all societal influence. That's insane. Much of it is very healthy, but you need to be aware of how these things influence you, and you need to be aware of whether or not your thoughts are your own. And that takes us neatly onto the next layer, the illusion of self. So far, we've been talking about these illusions in a way which is itself an illusion, because one of the deepest, most enduring deceptions of the human mind is the concept of self. Okay, so this is one of the hardest truths about lucid dreaming, about life on planet Earth, that you will ever have to face. And that is that your concept that you are an enduring self moving through the universe may in fact be a complete illusion. So here's an important thought. If you are a singular self, then how do you have lucid dreams and non-lucid dreams? How can you be two different kinds of self in each state? If you're a unified singular self, then surely all your dreams should be lucid. And who are you in your non-lucid dreams? In simplified scientific terms, in a non-lucid dream, you are a brain in REM sleep where the prefrontal cortex is mostly inactive. In a lucid dream, you are a brain in REM sleep with the prefrontal cortex activated. But that means that self is actually various different functions operating in unison. And depending on which brain functions are active and to which level, then your self is actually a variety of selves. And in practical terms, we see this in waking life all the time. You're a very different self when you're angry. You're a very different self when you're flooded with hormones and in love. You're a very different self when you're bored and sleepy. You are not a singular, unchanging self. There is not a you that switches on in a lucid dream. It is far more subtle, far more complex than that. This is a concept that isn't new at all. It's been around for a long time. Many of the original Buddhist texts talk about self as an illusion. What self seems to be is a narrative, a story the brain tells itself to make a cohesive identity across time. That as lucid dreamers, as people fighting for honesty and reality, we need to investigate the nature of self and come to the difficult conclusion that it's another story, another illusion. So here's a question, a little thread you can pull on that will allow you to explore this further. Who becomes lucid? Now, there isn't a definitive answer to this, but the act of asking this question will lead you in the right direction. So let's move to the next layer, the illusion of reality itself. So far, we've been unpicking the nature of self, the nature of memory, the nature of thoughts. But what if our perception of reality is also an illusion? In a lucid dream, we realize that the world we inhabit, the universe of dreams, is a construction, a model, a phantasm. But your experience of waking life right now is exactly the same. We spoke earlier about how your perception of reality is an interpretation. It's very easy to think about this on an intellectual level, but on a lived level, it feels very far from our lived experience. When we look out at the world, it feels like we're perceiving it directly. But that isn't true. It can't be true. Otherwise, simple things like optical illusions wouldn't work. If we perceived reality directly, we would see exactly what was on the page. And this can feel quite claustrophobic, because the reality is that your perception of the universe is just as much of an illusion as your concept of self, as your ability to simplify your beliefs, your ability to only see what you want to see. You have never experienced reality. You have lived your entire life in a form of waking dream. The world you're experiencing right now is the end of an equation. Your brain, the many functions of your brain that make up the various versions of you, do all sorts of magic under the hood before you perceive reality. So what does that mean? It means that you've never seen your own face. Not only is your perception limited by your sensory data, for example, you only see certain wavelengths of light, but those wavelengths of light, once they enter your eyes, get processed by your brain. They run through the many filters you have picked up over the years. The end result, your experience of reality, is a unique universe, a form of dream that only you will ever see. So in practical terms, you live your entire life in a mental model. So the question isn't, is this a dream? Because the answer to that is always yes. You are always experiencing a mental interpretation. The real question is, what kind of dream am I experiencing? So let's take a quick breather, because I know this stuff can instigate an existential crisis and feel really quite claustrophobic. The point here isn't to undermine everything you think you know about reality, but it's to remind you to remember that you are not what you think you are. Your universe is not what you think it is. It is to instill genuine humility, genuine honesty with how you interface with this universe. And this reminds me of one of my favourite quotes by the scientist Richard Feynman. The first principle is to not fool yourself, but you are the easiest person to fool. Now, interestingly, Richard Feynman was not a practicing lucid dreamer, but he had regular lucid dreams. Now, I believe it was because of this way of thinking. When you face reality directly, when you ask the difficult questions, when you don't fall for the illusions, lucid dreams become inevitable. As Carl Gustav Jung pointed out very correctly, human beings are storytellers. We invent myth. We are creatures of myth. The sense of self is a story. Our perception of reality is a story. Our memories are stories. We are storytellers. But we mustn't forget that stories are fiction, or in other words, a form of lie. Convenient, useful lies, no doubt, but they are fictional. As lucid dreamers, we are aiming to move beyond fiction towards truth. Now, one of the ways you can do that, one of the ways you can move towards more regular lucid dreams, is to engage in brutal self-honesty, brutal self-investigation. In practical terms, this is something of a dissolution of the ego. It is accepting genuine humility, being more open and honest and truthful, not only to others, but to yourself. Remember, you are the easiest person to fool, and you are an expert at it. That is what nature has designed you to be. Lucid dreaming is a tool that teaches us that we are creatures of illusion. It's pretty much all we can ever be. We are that by design. But by accepting it, by being humble, by asking difficult questions, by questioning your own thoughts, you will move closer to truth, closer to objectivity. And I know this can seem like an impossible mission. You're an illusion surrounded by illusions, lost in a storyline. But the goal isn't to get to ultimate truth. That's probably impossible. It's simply to try, to understand your limitations. When you understand your limitations, you're no longer a slave to them. I'm Daniel Love, and if you've enjoyed this video, you might enjoy one of the videos on the screen right now. I'll see you there.